Hey man, it's good to see you.
Hey, you too. Thanks for having me.
You know, I was going to say, I mean, what's new in your world? I mean, there's got to be a new controversy, and it's like there's always some kind of controversy around food happens. So,
Yeah, apparently there was one this week or last week. So, interestingly enough, you know what I'm like, Sean. I'm a curious person,
yeah,
and I'm sure everybody that's on this page will realize how possibly absurd going carnivore would have been 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and people would have said, "Oh, you're going to hurt people. You're crazy." And lo and behold, where we are now, more and more research, more and more studies, more and more people are adopting either a full carnivore approach or a variation of that and having an amazing results. Just like what I've promoted over the years was a paleo autoimmune keto approach, and we've had so many wonderful stories. But I was labelled a crackpot by the media, and interestingly enough, just recently, same thing. I mean, I seem to come in and out every 3 or 6 months with some sort of agenda from somewhere trying to discredit the work that we're doing. So, I mean, you're used to it, I'm used to it, and sometimes you're either just maybe a little ahead of the curve or maybe a lot. And as you probably understand, people are frightened of the things that they don't know, because if it was true or if it is true, then what does that mean for their belief systems?
yeah, it is challenging. You know, when you challenge somebody's belief systems and what they hold to be dear, it is frightening for them because they take some comfort in being able to retreat back to their sort of space there. But so Pete, I'm gonna put you on the spot about one thing. As a meat eating community, and we've got all kinds of differing opinions. We've got Democrats, we've got Republicans, we've got coronavirus deniers, or you know, we got all mask up, or we don't need a mask up. We've got you know, anti-vax, pro-vax. We got, you know, regenerative ag. We got commercial ag. All kinds of different mixes in here, and I don't really care. I mean, I'm just like, we're just about eating healthy and this stuff. But so one thing, I want to see if I can get you to give us a recipe, a carnivore friendly recipe, Pete, so we can put it on our website, man. Can we do that? Can you do that for us, man?
I would love that. Do you want me to actually send you one from
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
my
If you
books
don't
so you've
mind,
got it?
we'll do it, and we'll put it from one of your books or something like that, if you don't mind, just because that would be cool. Because I think, as you
Mate,
know, because I know as a chef, I don't know how many chef questions you get. It's mostly like controversy questions, it seems like.
yeah, funnily enough, I get very few questions about cooking. You know, it's like everything but. And but I would love to share some recipes
That would be
for you,
awesome,
brother.
Pete.
I'll send them through once we're finished, and you
Awesome.
can put
That's
them up.
great. Yeah, we'll put them
Um,
right on the website because I just got done eating, and I had my one meal of, and I'm on this one meal a day every few day type of thing right now. And I had a bunch of flounder, which I've come to like. I don't know what you
mm,
think about that. It seems like it's very delicate, but it doesn't have a real. It's got a pretty, you know, neutral taste, and it's whatever you season it with, it seems to take up. And I cooked that in ghee, and then I had some fillets, you know, steak fillets. But anyway, I don't know what's big down there. Flounder, if flounder a popular dish in Australia, probably not. I don't know. I don't
you,
know.
my dad actually used to spearfish for him when I was a boy, and flounder is regarded as one of the best fish all around the world. I mean, it's very similar to sole, and if you go through Europe, sole, or especially France and Italy, is one of the most sought after fish in fancy restaurants. You know, but it's also so easy to cook at home, as you probably realized. I mean, you can either bake it whole or roast it whole, or you take the fillets or fillets, as we say in Australia, and simply pan fry them. Either lemon with some butter or some olive oil is sensational. Maybe a touch of garlic, a little bit of parsley. Voila.
Yeah,
Or
that was mine. I've got some ghee. I've been using ghee a lot lately, and then I just threw some like lemon. It's just like a garlic pepper, salt, you know, herb mixture that comes, and I just sprinkle it on there, cook it up, and man, that stuff is good. I almost as
yeah,
like it. I this is almost blasphemy, but I almost like it as much as I when I eat my steaks. So
Sean Baker, you be
Yeah, it's
careful.
crazy. Getting
You
crazy.
stay in the steak lane, brother. Controversy.
I
Sean
know.
Baker enjoys fish equally as much as
Yeah,
steak.
that is controversial topic. But
Break the internet. You'll
so
get the
you've been
pescatarians after you.
so tell me about, because I see you out on your skateboard ramp, and I don't know, are you able to surf right now? Because I know you love getting on the water and surfing. Is that kind of shut down where you are?
Yes and no. I think the whole world is yes and no on everything at the moment. And it was interesting when you were talking about that before. You've got the Democrats and the Republicans. You've got the whatever it may be, the pro and the antis and this and that. And generally, I apparently I'm controversial, but I pretty much stay in the middle of pretty much everything. I'm not for or against political, whatever it may be. I'm sort of in the middle. And the one thing that is interesting at the moment is, in this country anyway, in Australia, is there seems to be so many conflicting messages. Like even this morning, it's 8 a.m. here in Sydney. I looked at the headlines across our major media outlets, and I also looked at the Drudge Report in the USA, because I enjoy scanning scanning their page. But the mainstream in Australia, you read the most popular, what you would call independent mainstream media, and every story is basically arguing against the one before. There's so much conflict, there's so much confusion. Nobody knows what is going on. And you read mainstream media and you get even more confused, because one health minister says this, then another health minister from another part of the country says this. We're going to open it in a week. I looked at Drudge Report today, and there's a story in there that says Australia will not open for another year from social distancing. It's like, nobody's got a clue. But the one thing that we do have in common is we can cook some delicious food each and every day, whether that's one meal in your case today, or 3 meals, or whatever. And I saw there was a question before about cooking offal, and I would love to share my quick little offal take for you. And lamb's liver, if you've never cooked lamb liver before, it is probably the closest thing I would say to steak. So if you love steak and you want to explore an offal, I would say if you can get a really good quality grass-fed, grass-finished, maybe organic lamb liver, and treat it the same way you would as a steak. You don't want to overcook it, because once you overcook offal, that's when the metallic flavor starts to come in. That's when it becomes really powerful and overbearing. So I studied from the French culinary tradition, and what they really have worked out is, especially with liver, you cook it to medium rare. So lamb liver, what I love to do is some good spices on there, if you can tolerate spices. So pepper, salt. If you can do some ground cumin, I would say pop a little bit of that on, maybe some ground coriander, but it's up to you on your dietary approach. But I'm a big fan of spices, and I find that gives flavor. Cook it in your ghee or your coconut oil or your beef tallow or lard or duck fat even. And sear it on each side a good couple of minutes until it's still pink in the middle. Let it rest, slice it, and then squeeze a lemon over the top if you like, or some apple cider vinegar or some extra virgin olive oil, and eat that. I tell you what, it'll change the game for you. And I did this, cooked it for my wife recently, and she actually said it is better than steak. And I know that's blasphemy for you, Sean, but I'd say give it a try. And the other thing, if you want to include organ meats in your diet, and I did this the other night, and everybody, because I'm going to do this tonight to my children as an experiment, and I got some beef heart mince. So just ground beef, but using the heart of grass-fed, grass-finished beef heart. And I cooked it very, very simply for myself. And tonight I'm going to experiment with a Mexican spice for beef heart for my children. And as you know, I do eat vegetables, and my kids eat vegetables. So we're going to do some sweet potato, very thinly sliced, baked in the oven, a Mexican beef heart mince on top, and then a guacamole or just some diced avocado with some lemon juice on top. Because that's my daughter's, one of their favorite foods, apart from salmon eggs, is nachos. So this beef heart, it tastes like just normal beef mince or ground beef. And no one's the wiser. And you can look up the health benefits of eating heart if you like. And I think it's coenzyme 10 and a whole lot of other stuff that's pretty powerful. So you can try that. So I've taught you about liver. You can make pate, which is really, really simple. And bone marrow, as you know, is probably one of my favorite foods. You just roast that in the oven for 10 minutes and salt and pepper. And I mean, that's the perfect carnivore food right there, in my opinion.
Yeah, the bone marrow is just absolutely delicious, and
Oh.
it's we had a rancher on the other day, or a group that provides beef, and they're selling their bone marrow, the little troughs of beef. That's just wonderful. It's fun talking about food. Even though I just ate, I'm still hungry, and Travis is in the background, got his picture of his sizzling meat on the back there again, but. What as far as foods that are out there, what's your favorite type, Pete? I mean, you said you train in the classic French sort of sense, so obviously a lot of rich sauces and stuff like that. But I mean, do you have a favorite, you know, cultural food or something like that?
Are you trying to get me in trouble with the rest of the world?
Yeah, probably. Or just name a few that you enjoy. How's that?
Well, not in any order of preference, but as a chef, I would say, apart from the French, the Japanese cuisine and culture is so unique. And it is the one, I'm a huge fan of sashimi. I'm a huge fan of that craft and that art. And what I love about it is if I can get to a really, really good Japanese restaurant, put it this way, I would never eat at an average Japanese restaurant. There's just no point. But I will look forward to the one or two or three times a year that I make the journey to a top end Japanese restaurant. Sometimes I go by myself because it's nearly like a ritual for me, and it's a sacred ceremony as such, because I'll sit in front of the counter of a master with their knife or knives and watch what they do, nearly like in meditation, of the amount of respect and attention to detail that they have when it comes to slicing a piece of fish. Now, this might sound crazy, but when you understand that some of these Japanese master chefs train 5 to 10 years just in the craft of how to slice a piece of fish so you can put it in your mouth with nothing, no cooking, nothing else on it, unless you want a bit of lemon juice or salt or a little bit of tamari or soy, up to you. And I'm mesmerized by that because I can cook pretty much everything in the world equally as good as anybody else, because cooking is so simple. It's a list of ingredients cooked in a certain method for a desired result. And once you do it over and over and over and over, you get better at it, right? But it's a pretty simple formula. It's not life operating surgery here. It's just generally a piece of meat or fish cooked in a pan or roasted with a bit of seasoning and a bit of fat. Like it's the simplest thing in the world. Or to make a dressing, it's olive oil and some sort of acid, lemon juice or vinegar and seasoning. But the Japanese sashimi, mate, I can't do it as good as them yet, which is why I go out and I'm in awe and mesmerized of just the craftsmanship and the dedication to a craft or their art form is second to none. And you can find that all around the world. I've been in Malaysia and visited a street stall where they just cook one dish and their family has been cooking it for 3 or 4 generations in that same market. That same little food vendor or little truck on the side of the road, or whatever you call it, the cart. And it might cost you $1 in Malaysia, Australian dollars, and you could have the best dish you've ever had in the world. And you're just like, whoa, And recently I was filming a TV show in Portugal, and I was working with a 3 Michelin star chef. And the show that I do in the United States is called Movable Feast. It's on PBS, and it's a beautiful cooking show. And I always cook ketogenic or paleo dishes there, but the chefs that I work with cook whatever they want. And we travel generally around the United States. So check it out for anybody in the States that's never watched that show. It's called A Movable Feast, and it's on PBS, and you can download episodes for free, from what I understand. But in Portugal, I work with this chef, and he cooked me probably one of the best dishes I've ever had in my life. And it was this organic lamb, and there was basically 3 ingredients. It was lamb, it was water. Well, at first he made some broth out of the bones. So he made a lamb broth, and then basically some garlic and oil in a pan. All the pieces of the lamb. So it was a whole lamb. So just pieces from all over, from the leg, from the shoulder, from the ribs, from you name it. It was in there. And then that broth on top. He cooked it for a few hours, took it off. And I tell you what, it was probably one of the tastiest things I've ever eaten. And it was so simple. And I said, where does this recipe come from? He goes, oh, it's my grandmother's recipe. And he's a chef that is a 3 Michelin star chef, and in his restaurant, he sources the finest things from all over the world, and is so intricate in what he does, you know, maybe all these different cooking methods. And he said to me, he goes, I would rather eat that dish from my grandmother over all this fancy stuff that I do at a restaurant. I think it's the same sort of philosophy with the Japanese as well. It's that raw slice of fish, sliced to perfection, and then presented to somebody to eat. It's like, oh, simple is best is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Yeah, Terry, who goes by Carnivore Chef, I guess he shares your occupation, was saying that, you know, simple food often is just the best. I mean, you get good ingredients and you don't need too much to make it shine.
I cooked Mexican mince actually last night on Facebook Live for people, and it was so simple. It was ground beef, a few spices, and it was pork mince actually we used, and it was a mixture of pork and veal, and in there were different spices, and I served a fried egg on top of it. And mate, it took 10 minutes from start to finish, and it was so delicious. Like for cooking's so simple. We just think it's hard, and yeah. I'll share you a couple of recipes and you can put it up on your site.
No, we're super excited to have those, Pete. Hey, what, you know, for the amateur chefs in the audience, I mean, what would be like your top 3 or 4 or 5 things to either know or have, you know, just, you know, and mind you, most of us are cooking some kind of meat dish here.
Yeah.
Is there some things you say these are, you know, knife skills or different pans, or what are your thoughts on what are the essentials for a good meal preparation?
First and foremost, a really good knife, you know, and it might cost you $100, it might cost you $200, but it should last you the rest of your life. And if you take care of it and sharpen it, or get a professional to sharpen it every 3 to 6 months, and maybe even learn how to sharpen it, is even better. I think that was always the first thing that was taught to me as a young chef, was look after your knives, get yourself a really good one that'll last you forever. And then some people, and Travis might be agreeing here, is that sometimes then you become a bit of a knife aficionado, where you start to collect knives from all around the world. You'll have that Japanese sashimi knife. You might have the cleaver from China, you know, for chopping up your bones so you can make your bone broth. You might have a beautiful boning knife to do your butchering. You might have a beautiful filleting knife or filleting knife for your seafood. So you start to expand your collection, so to speak. So you have the right tool for the right job. And I mean, the great thing about carnivore is you don't really need that much, depending where you get your food from. But a sharp knife, once you've rested a ribeye, for instance, for a ribeye steak, for 10 minutes after you've roasted it so it's perfectly medium rare, rest it. And then, is there anything more satisfying than slicing through a perfectly cooked piece of steak. I mean, seriously, it's just, I mean, eating it is, but just that, again, going back to that appreciation of food. And you don't want to be struggling with your teeth. And that's why restaurants, they slice the steak and then they serve it to you. So you don't have to do as much work and it becomes a more pleasurable experience. So I do that with my children as well. We slice all the steak so it's presented nicely so they can just sit there and relax. So it's not this thing. The teeth do the work eventually, you know. So a good knife, a really good chopping board. Now, and the thing about the chopping board is I like to, first thing I got taught as well at culinary school is put a damp cloth or a little bit of a wet piece of absorbent paper or something underneath the chopping board to stop it from sliding all over the bench. So that's really about safety and about cleanliness and organization for your workbench. So have that, then you're not going to cut yourself. So, or a very stable chopping board. I mean, it might sound crazy, but I tell you what, once you learn that, it's a game changer. Number 3, some really good music to play when you're preparing your food and when you're eating your food is paramount. I'm of the daggy 80s songs when I'm in the kitchen generally, or some Beatles or Fleetwood Mac or something uplifting, because I'm of the belief that we put our energy into the food and whatever state we're in as we're cooking will be translated into the food. If you've ever watched anything from Bruce Lipton, and I've got a wonderful podcast with him and he talks about the energetics of everything. I'm a firm believer in that. And if you watch the movie Like Water for Chocolate, you know, that's sort of the principle that I like to do, which is why when I send you an email, Sean, it says cook with love and laughter. You know, there's a reason that's my signature, is because I feel like we can impart extra flavor or extra energy into the food that we make. Just like when people grow their favorite plant and they sing to it or they play music to it, it's a similar principles in that. And I think that's why I'll go back to that Japanese chef, because they're putting so much passion and attention to detail into that. It is nearly like a Zen-like state. So it's very meditative. So that's number 3. Number 4 is good fats. I don't think we can ever argue about the essential nature of really good quality fats. And again, one of the first things I learned as a chef was the appreciation of fat for flavor. We're talking duck fat, chicken fat, beef fat, pork fat, lamb fat, extra virgin olive oil, if you choose to have it, or coconut oil, if you choose to include it in your diet. And I know some people are hardcore carnivore, and I get that, but you know, it doesn't matter really, because you can still use great quality beef tallow or duck fat. You know, there's a reason why the French use duck fat in most of their cooking, is because it imparts flavor and it's a beautiful saturated fat. And my fridge is duck fat, goose fat, chicken fat, beef tallow, lard, and on the bench I have coconut oil and extra virgin olive oil. And sometimes I do mixtures of them. Sometimes I just focus on one and I experiment. Like I just experiment. So good quality fat. And then the last one would be good quality salt. Again, it's essential for us. None of this iodized table salt is just, I can't endorse that, but I can endorse, actually, I just got a shipment the other day of wonderful salt from Utah, I think it was, from Salt Lake. And I don't even know the brand of it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful unrefined salt. And I think it's got 82 or 84 trace minerals in it. And so if you go into my pantry, I've got salt from the United States. I've got salt from the United Kingdom. I've got salt from France. I've got salt from Australia. I have got salt from another part of the world. I have beautiful pepper that has been shipped to me by this wonderful pepper grower from India. And I'm very particular about the spices that I use, and because you have to realize that some of these spices are grown non-organically and they can be pretty toxic ingredients, I think. So always quality. And I guess that probably wraps up everything that I was saying then, the 5 things. It's about quality.
Yeah, one thing, and I echo your sentiments about the duck fat. I mean, my goodness, like a duck confit or something like that.
Oh,
Oh my God, it's so good. I want to, this is a new concept. I mean, kind of a new kind. You talk about mixing the fats because most of us just cook in one fat. We just pick, we're going to cook our dish and we're going to throw it in some type of fat, whether it's ghee, butter, olive oil, coconut, whatever. What experiments you do with different fats? That's intriguing to me. And have you found any kind of combinations of fats really work well together?
I'm a big fan of bacon fat. I actually just cooked some bacon for my daughters yesterday. And I'm one of these people that promote a paleo, keto, carnivore approach, but I don't really promote bacon that much. Shock. But we tend to eat it maybe once a week, once a fortnight. But again, it's top quality. And what comes out of that bacon fat, or the fat that comes out of the bacon into the pan, that's gold. That's where I cook my vegetables in afterwards. So if I want to roast some, if I want to roast some broccoli, I put it into that pan that I've saved, or the tray that's had the bacon fat into it. Bacon fat and broccoli, and I'm sorry for all the carnivores that aren't eating greens at the moment, but adding some bacon fat to your greens is what I love to do. So I guess on the list of flavor profiles, so here's what I generally do. So the really saturated fats, like the duck fat, the lard, the beef tallow, they're for the cooking, the first stage, okay? So I generally cook the steak or the liver or whatever it is in that to fit at the start. And then once it's off the cooking elements and it's rested, and then once it goes onto the plate, that's generally where I add my extra virgin olive oil, or maybe an avocado oil, or something that isn't as, I guess, as viscous and saturated in that form, if that's the right word, and a little bit more floral in flavor, if that makes sense. So the plant-based oils, if you choose to have them, and I understand for many of you that that's a no-no at the moment. So that's how I use the 2 different fats. Same thing when I cook in coconut oil sometimes. I again finish it with extra virgin olive oil over the top, because I don't really heat up my extra virgin olive oil. I use it just as a dressing and a sauce. So
Yeah, so it seemed like the saturated fats are the best fats for cooking by far, it would seem, yeah.
yeah. I'm a yeah. And it was, you talk about controversy. There was an article yesterday or actually last night, it came out in one of our leading newspapers saying that experts are warning against my new book, which is, and they said, experts are warning against Pete Evans' new controversial book, which promotes animal fats and proteins. It's like, fucking hell.
Julia Child is rolling over in her grave, I'm sure, I mean, kind of, animal fats. But that's, I guess, one thing I was going to ask about, because a lot of restaurants, a lot of us go to restaurants, and not right now because of this COVID-19 thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, traditionally most restaurants are cooking stuff in soybean oil, canola oil.
It's a
Thoughts
problem.
on that, and and just to expand on that thing, do you think there's going to be significant change in the daily practice of restaurants going forward? I mean, do you think this COVID-19 is going to have lasting impacts on the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry? I think Terry asked kind of that question.
Hey Terry, thanks for the question, mate. I've got my answer to everything about this COVID-19 is I have no fucking idea, and so that's I have no idea.
That's probably the most honest answer anybody can give, quite honestly. We all like to
I have
act
no
like we're an
idea.
authority, but yeah, uh,
But
but but what
going
about
into
the restaurants cooking in the coconut oil, not the coconut oil, the canola oil,
yep.
the soybean oil?
So here's my take on it: is that the restaurateurs and chefs, and I'm going to generalize here for the ones that use those fats, the vegetable oils, for instance, they're just not educated yet. they're just not educated yet, or they actually believe they're doing the right thing for their client base from what is considered the norm. Just like the controversial article in the paper again about me and animal fats, you know. So I would say the majority of the public still believe that animal fats are bad for us. So, and you have to understand that, I'm sure you are aware that chefs generally are not in the business of health and nutrition. You know, I am, and Terry's probably an anomaly or a small minority. I follow some of the world's greatest chefs on social media, and they still don't get the importance of this. Some do, but still not from a health point of view. And I made it my decision, and I fell into that basket for 20 years of my, I was cooking canola oil because I thought it was the right thing. I had no idea, you know, cottonseed oil. And I look back of it, I go, oh, oops, you know, but given what I knew at that time, that's what I knew. And so we can't blame anybody for not changing when they don't know. And the flip side of that is restaurants are in the business of trying to not go broke. Okay. It's probably one of the hardest industries in the world to stay afloat and to actually make a dollar. And I was involved in the restaurant, and I had my own restaurants for 20 odd years. And I tell you, Sean, I worked 80 to 100-hour weeks for those 20 years to not go broke. And the margins that you have in a restaurant, maybe 1 to 2 or 3%, if you're lucky. You have a bad weather comes through one day, you lose money that week. You know, people don't turn up for their reservation, you lose money. It's such a fine line between making and not making money. And the canola oils, the cottonseed oils, the vegetable oils, they are a lot cheaper than the saturated fats that we're talking about. So it's a really tricky situation. It's like, why don't restaurants use organic produce? Because their competitor next door sells a dish for $10 and they're not using organic. And if you use organic, you might have to sell it for $12 or $13. And the public don't generally, I'm generalizing here, don't take that into account, because even the public don't care what's going in their mouth hole, you know, most of the time. So, and generally anybody that does care about their health aren't usually the people that go out to eat at restaurants, you know, and I'm generalizing here. The ones that use the restaurant or takeaway are the ones that probably don't have the time to cook at home. And, you know, and again, I'm generalizing, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody. But for me, I rarely go out to eat. And the reason for that is I don't know what they're cooking it in. I don't know where the produce comes from. There are a few restaurants that I will go out to from time to time to be a member of the human race and not be a hermit, and support local businesses and my friends that are in those businesses, and just to have that experience of dining in a restaurant. But I got to tell you, I would rather be sitting with my family at home, listening to some pleasant music than some of the shit that they play in these restaurants these days, and hearing some of the conversations around me in those restaurants and eating unknown food. But that's just me. You know, there's something to be said about cooking at home. And I think what this COVID-19 is giving us an invitation to do is to develop our skills a lot more at home in the kitchen while we have this lockdown situation. And, you know, whether you wanted to learn yoga, whether you wanted to start your artwork, whether you want to learn a musical instrument, whether you want to learn a new language, whether you want to start doing your push-up challenge that you did last year, Sean, or whatever it may be, you know, this is a perfect invitation and nearly an initiation for us to expand on or create another layer or another identity for ourselves and to learn new skills. And I would say to anybody, if you're interested, I do have a 10-week program that is completely free. 100,000 people have adopted it. and no one seems to have got sicker yet from doing it. There is vegetables in it, but you can adapt it to be carnivorous or a carnivore approach, and it's called the paleo way. And there's 350 recipes in there for free, and lots of cooking videos and lots of information. And you can take what you want, you know. I mean, the people on the carnivore approach don't just leave out the vegetables, but every single, I think out of the 350 recipes, I would say 300 of them are meat and seafood based. That will be very simply spiced or with a simple sauce or dressing, which you can adapt to your own philosophies. But that's at thepaleoway.com, and there's no strings attached. It's not like you sign up for a week and then all of a sudden I'm going to charge you. You know, it's completely free for the next 2 months. So feel free to have a look at that. And at this particular point in time, that might be something you want to look at, you know, just to up your cooking skills. But the beautiful thing about what you promote, Sean, and what everybody here has is you actually have the easiest time in the kitchen out of everybody, which gives you the more time to learn that musical instrument, to work on your physical or spiritual or emotional journey or things that you want to create into the world. So here's to carnivores. That's all I can say. You've kept it simple, and I love it. And that's how mainly I eat. And I still put some plant material on the plate, and especially for my kids at this moment. And but I would say I eat more meat and fat and seafood now than I ever have in my life. And sometimes it is a carnivore day. Sometimes I add a little bit of sweet potato or some fermented vegetables or some sprouts or something like that. And I've had 4 carnivore experts onto my podcast, and no vegan experts yet. So you can tell where I'm leaning towards.
Yeah, Pete, I think that's a wonderful, sentiment to think about. You know, we've got this time, people are trapped at home. Um, I just out of necessity, I cook almost 99% of my meals just because one, going out to eat at a steak in a restaurant every night is prohibitively costly. And, so you get good at doing that, and you really sort of, it becomes, I mean, I've gotten to where like when I'm cooking whatever, it's fun. I mean, it's kind of like a work of art. You're kind of just, and everything's a little bit different, but you're trying to perfect it, and you take a lot of care, particularly when you get a really nice cut of meat and you just like, I might sous vide it ahead of time and insert it a certain way and season it a certain way and rest it, and you go through it's a ritual. And I know we've talked a lot about the experiential aspect of cooking and dining and eating, and it's very important. And even to us crazy carnivores that just mostly eat meat, we still enjoy the experience, or I sure as hell do. And if you're not, you're in the wrong diet. If you don't like the food, go do something else. But just, because you're someone that clearly is trying to take advantage of all the life experiences. And I know you recently have you've done the Magic Pill, which was a great service for the low carb ketogenic community. And I think a lot of people appreciate the work you've done around that, just raising awareness. And I think we need more and more of that to counter the other kind of propaganda that's out there. But you've recently sort of looked into some of these medicinal plant uses. And I know you talked about ayahuasca and stuff like that. So I want to just get your impression on that stuff. And, what's it like doing an ayahuasca retreat or trip or whatever? I've heard some crazy things about that. Can you tell us about your experience with that, Pete?
Sean, you're putting me in the hot seat at the moment. Any journalists out there from Australia, please go away.
Feel free to disregard if you want to skip this conversation. But
I'm very open to speaking about all of this. So, and this is what I find so fascinating. And because I've had yourself on the podcast, I've had Paul Saladino, which I'm just about to launch this week, actually, and I've had other experts that are on that talk about, and the philosophy is meat only, but then I asked the question, I said, well, what about turmeric? Because isn't that a medicine from a plant? Or what about cannabis? Because I hear a lot of people that, I've got a new film coming out very soon called The Magic Plant. And I spent a year studying cannabis, like I did with the Magic Pill, where I studied food. And the interesting thing is I met one girl that has Crohn's disease, and we know that going carnivore can, autoimmune paleo can really benefit people with gut disorders, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, you name it, they seem to improve. Now, here's a girl, a young girl in Australia who started juicing cannabis. She juiced cannabis by the work of Dr. William Courtney, I believe his name was, who was a raw cannabis advocate. Now, that's the only change that she made in her life with Crohn's disease. And it stopped all the flare-ups. She started behaving normal, like just living a normal life again. And so I have this really and I'm so curious about the plant world, because we have these medicines, and that's where all pharmaceuticals seem to have been derived from originally, is from plant compounds or the natural world. So we have this really interesting relationship with nature. And I'm always of I had Sally Fallon, for instance, from Nourishing Traditions on the podcast this week. And when I release that, that might cause a bit of controversy out there, which is interesting. But, and she pretty much eats, from what I could tell, mainly a carnivorous diet with a little bit of well-presented or well sought out plants and prepared in a very traditional way. And I also had Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride on, who created the GAPS diet this week, and I interviewed her. Same thing. So I'm fascinated about our human co-evolution with plants and animals. And how can a plant be medicine when so many people take away the plants and they get better, but then other people put plants into their diet while still eating meat, and they get better as well? So again, I sort of sit in the box of, I have no idea how this all works, but I'm curious about it. And I'm not suggesting people to go out there and juice cannabis and give up everything else because she still eats meat and whatnot. But I found it fascinating that just that one change for her improved her gut integrity. So I've asked microbiome experts about cannabis and why this happens. And, you know, there's so many different theories and understandings out there. But to go back to your question about these other plant medicines, and I'm drinking one right now. So I released a video 2 days ago. You can go to my YouTube channel, which is called Evolve, which has that sign on it there. And I am drinking the oldest plant medicine that I think humans have ever had, and it's called tea. You know, and it is the most widely drank drink, if that makes sense, if that's the right vocabulary. These are tea leaves. They come from the Camellia sinensis plant from China and Taiwan. And we have been drinking this for however long, since we've been putting things into water, leaves into water and boiling them up. And it's the second most consumed drink in the world. And I view it as a medicine because I have it every morning. I don't drink coffee. This is my way I start the day. And my wife does a beautiful tea ceremony most mornings. And if she's not here, then I start my day with this. And I'm generally sitting in the sun, naked, with my cup of tea, if I can. And that's how I start my day, with a medicine. And when I release this video, you can check it out. The lady talks about tea being a medicine because it has deep roots and it helps to ground us into our reality. So I don't see plant medicines as always being a psychedelic experience, even though I'm happy to talk to you about that, say something like ayahuasca. So I spent a week in Costa Rica last year, and I drank basically a tea that was the culmination of 2 different plants mixed together, brewed down into a viscous, thick tea. And you drink that, and for some reason, our bodies and our minds and our consciousness interacts with these plant compounds and gives us an experience that is very, very difficult to describe for anybody that has never experienced it. And what people would say is the only way you could really understand is to experience it yourself. Now, I'm not telling anybody or advising anybody to go down that path. It seems to be gaining a little bit more popularity these days. And the reason I went down there is because I'm curious. And I do have to say that where I went was the first medically approved ayahuasca clinic in the world, called Rhythmia. And they've got Western doctors there. They've got shamans on site. They've got counselors on site. They've got nurses on site. It's a pretty tightly run enterprise and retreat and facility. And you have 80 people there that go and drink medicine from these plants. And Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, was there. He had 40 of his friends and colleagues there, and we drank ceremony together 4 nights in a row. And it was, the only word you could say is it's profound. Just like when people adopt a new dietary approach and find a new version of themselves, they call it profound, and they want to tell everybody about it. Now, I don't want to tell everybody about an ayahuasca, because it's not for everybody. And this is what everybody says, you know, if you're called to it, then you're called to it. If you're not, you're not. And there are risks involved, like everything. Major risks involved in consuming something like that if you're not prepared. So, and even if you are prepared, there's still risks involved. You know, it can be extremely challenging, because what it can do is it can shatter your version of reality in a way that if you're not prepared for that, and again, nobody can be prepared for their reality to be shattered into a million pieces, so that, and then put back together in a new way. And that's the only way I can describe it. But I'm very grateful for the experience. I'm grateful for all the plant and animal journeys that I've been on in that realm. And some people would say I'm crazier for it. I feel like I'm more grounded because of it. And I have a very different view on the world because of those experiences. Just like I have a very different view on the world from exploring the propaganda around our food system. And I have a very different view on the world after investigating regenerative agriculture versus monocropping. You know, so I view these things as more education for myself and more understanding about myself in a way in which I can view myself and the world that we inhabit. So I hope that that helps a little bit.
That's interesting, Pete. And I do want to talk for the last few minutes we have here about that last topic you mentioned, the regenerative agriculture, because as consumers of food, most of us have no clue. We don't do it. We take sort of for granted how our food gets to us. We go to the store, we pick it up, we go to a restaurant, we order it, we order a pizza online, you know, whatever. For us, probably don't do that anymore, most of us. But you know, as someone who is obviously intimately involved in the consumption side of the equation, whereas you know you're creating wonderful dishes, serving, you know, making people happy by giving them a great food dining experience. What are your thoughts on production of food going forward? What's going on locally in Australia? Are we all going to are we going to say, we're just going to get rid of animal agriculture and we're going to all eat this sort of synthesized food that these big companies are trying to gear us toward? What do you think the way forward should be or could be or is going to be?
I'll go back to my default. I don't know. I have no idea. I had a fella on my podcast last week called, for the second time, and I would highly encourage everybody to have a listen to that podcast. It's with a gentleman called Charles Eisenstein. Eistenstein, I think is how you pronounce it. Charles Eisenstein. You can go to my webpage, Pete Evans. You can go to podcasts, and he's got 2 podcasts in there, and it'll be probably the 4th or 5th one from the top at the moment. And he has a wonderful mind in the way in which And Dr. Kelly Brogan, the psychiatrist, introduced me to him, and I'm a big fan of Kelly's work. And she's what you would call a psychiatrist, clinical psychiatrist that has woken up from once upon a time handing out prescription pills to her patients, and then she discovered paleo or ketogenic and all of these things. But going back to Charles, I invited him onto the podcast because he wrote a book wrote an essay recently, 2 weeks ago, called The Coronation. And it's his summation of the coronavirus and what it offers humanity and his take on it. And again, he says he has no idea which way this could go because there's infinite possibilities. And that's something you learn in a plant medicine journey as well, which becomes very true in that experience. Is we as human beings, we create our own reality, but we're at the same time, we co-create it with everything else on the planet. So we're in this sort of paradox where we can create our own, but we also need to co-create it with everybody else. Now, we're at a point in human history at the moment where we're so disconnected. We have, as you started off this chat, we have the Democrats and the Republicans, we have the vegans and the carnivores, we have the Christians and the Jewish and the Muslims. We have we even have this crazy notion of patriotism. You know, our country is this, and we're separate from here. You know, I'm Australian, so this is how I think, and this is America, and that's how we think, and you know, that's China, and they're the baddies over there, and here, there, and the other. And how are we ever going to come to a common unity when we have so much division and so much animosity against other people with different beliefs? So what Charles was saying was that this is an initiation for us at this particular time, because we haven't had a situation like this where we're all in something pretty much together ever since the wars. But for our generation, this is a connective sort of happening. And he said, if we do not, there's millions of paths in which we can go as a civilization that are presented to us, that are options for us from this particular point in human history. And he said, you know, he wrote a book called A More Beautiful World. And we're being offered here a chance to create a more beautiful world from coming out of this initiation period. Now, if we don't come together to protect the planet, let's give the perfect example, regenerative agriculture. We know the work of Alan Savory, for instance. We know the work of Joel Salatin. We know the power of regenerative farming, holistic farming practices to help the environment, to help the soil, to sequester carbon if you're into that sort of thing. But there's solutions out there that we can employ on a large scale. And Charles was saying, if we don't get it right this time, after this, he goes, we will be offered another chance of this down the track, but it'll probably be a harder situation we're going to face. And if we don't come through that together again with common unity to help the planet, to help humanity, to help all the creatures on there living in harmony, we will be offered that again. And it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years, it could be the next pandemic. We will come together. If we don't get it right, the cycle will keep coming until we start to create a more beautiful world. So even at the moment, I'm looking at what's happening with everything. I don't think that's going to happen yet, even though part of me is like, you can create the world, Mr. Evans, you create the reality, but at the same time, we need to co-create it with our community. And I don't, you know, I'm watching Lark here patting her dog or cat, I think it is, you know, g'day Lark. And, you know, imagine if more people could connect like that, you know, and have self-love for themselves. And I don't think it's a difficult transition of what we need to do for that common unity. And I'm looking at you, the Meet RX community. Community means a common unity. And I'm a big proponent of regenerative agriculture, but for the masses, for the population, to get to where you are, and you, Lark, and you, David, and Lee, and everybody here that's watching. I mean, you probably see it with your family. You see it with your friends and colleagues. We're not even that percentage of people on this planet, I don't think. So what's the tipping point for us for regenerative agriculture to become the norm? What will it take? And I don't have a pessimistic view, but I think I have a realistic view, is that, like Charles said, the systems are going to have to break. And now what does that mean? I don't know. How much sacrifice do we have to do? How much death and destruction are we going to encounter? Whether it is, new technologies rolled out, and I'm not going down the conspiracy theory path here, but what if some of these new technologies that come out are harmful for us? Will that be the catalyst for us to reevaluate everything that we're doing at the moment? It seems that chronic illness hasn't been the wake-up call for the population yet, because we're still in that medical paradigm and belief system that we can go out there and take that magic pill. Or if we are obese and we can't get on top of it, we're recommended from our doctors to get gastric band surgery as a solution without changing the way that we live. So what's the tipping point for the population to actually get on board with regenerative agriculture, with potential harms from this, that, and the other that is potentially circulating or being rolled out around the world at the moment? Will we need to get to a point like cigarettes, for instance, where once upon a time people thought it was cool and no issues smoking cigarettes, and now we look back and go, we got that one wrong. So I wonder whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years where we look back, if we have that, or we don't, and all I can say is live by example. We still, at this particular point in time, can support regenerative agriculture through the people that are doing it, to support them with the dollars that we spend. We can hopefully lead by example and share stories from our friends and colleagues that have either gone carnivore or paleo or keto and changed their life, and that might inspire a ripple effect in your community. And all of a sudden that could create that rise of awareness, or that questioning of our current systems, so that we get to that point where we have a louder voice or a more combined consciousness of where we would like to create a more beautiful world. I mean, to give you an example, I have a farm that we live on, and we just killed 2 pigs that we raised this week for the last year. And I can't wait to get up there tomorrow and cook some of those pigs. They're all in the freezer at the moment. But all around my farm is sugarcane. It's the sugarcane capital of Australia. And guess what they still do? They still fly planes. They still drop poison from their planes onto the sugarcane. This is 2020, the year 2020. And they're doing it. Our farm is right next to a sugarcane farm. And they do that. And then they burn it. And all that ash goes across the community. Then the livestock that we have, like horses, pigs, whatever it may be, chickens, all that ash lands on our property and others. And you speak to the council and say, hey, how come in 2020 they can still fly and drop poisons on a community? Because we're allowed to, they're allowed to, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm like, okay, well, it's a crazy world we live in, Sean, and you know that better than anybody. And to keep sane is That's why I have my tea every morning to ground me and with good food, so it's not inflaming my brain and my system and not causing anything, which keeps me grounded. Otherwise, you know, you can understand why the population is living in fear and have so many mental issues and so many chronic illnesses. But that is the fucking norm.
Yeah, I think the thing you said that sort of grabs me the most is, you know, we have such a huge chronic disease epidemic, and that alone by itself is not a wake-up call. We need the system to actually break catastrophically before we make a change. And what if these new, you know, fake food technologies come out and they're not that bad? That's probably even worse than if they're bad, because if they're not that bad, then it's full steam ahead. And we can kind of just kiss all that other stuff goodbye. So we have to hope for, you know, you almost have to pray for a disaster for something to be changed radically. But, you know, again, I am optimistically pressing on, but realistically, you know, saying that, you know, what we may be doing is in vain, but I don't think it lessens the necessity for us to do what we're doing and trying to keep getting this message out here. Pete, we've kept you for an hour. I want to say thank you so much. It's been fascinating, informative. We love hearing this. Looking forward to your recipes.
I'll send them to you. I do want to finish off with one thing, if that's okay.
No, that's okay. Sure, absolutely, of course.
Because you started off by saying the controversy, and to give you an idea, and anybody that's watched The Magic Pill, which is our film on Netflix, I think it comes off next week. So if you haven't watched it, please watch it. And that was sort of our gift to humanity as our investigative journey into how to eat and to hopefully overcome a lot of disease. And we filmed with the Indigenous in Australia, and we went hunting with them, and we caught stingray and ate some beautiful food with them, and really to pay respect to our Indigenous brothers and sisters from across the world, and what they have, their wisdom and their just the beauty, the way that they respected nature. They would eat nose to tail, they would eat seasonal, they would have a community, they would have their community, right? And just to give you an idea of what the current situation is in the world. So when that movie came out, we had the president of the Australian Medical Association tweet that film is dangerous. I am dangerous to the community. I'm dangerous to the community for bringing this film out. And he called for Netflix to ban it and to remove it off the air. This is the president of the Australian Medical Association. I simply wrote back, you know, not to him, but onto my social media. I said, when you can show me evidence that eating organic, grass-fed and grass-finished meat, wild-caught seafood and organic vegetables is harmful to a human being, because that's all we've presented in this film. I said, you show me the evidence, and then I'm happy to have a conversation with you. They can't. It's impossible. But the toothpaste is already out of the tube, because every single news outlet in the country has said, Pete Evans is dangerous. Do not watch this film. You will harm your friends and family if you even look at this. So and then my second question was, would this harm your industry? Simple question. How do you think this could harm your industry? Because it's definitely not harming any human beings, that's for sure. And at the same time, it's causing better soil. It's regenerative farming, promoting that. So you've got to be very careful with what you read. And I know I went onto your site yesterday, Sean, when you said you were having me on here, and you know, even so many people, and this is the crazy thing, I just want to finish with this, is even people that follow you from Australia think that what I say is crazy. Now, are those the same people that would have thought carnivore was crazy 10 years ago? Are they the same people that read mainstream news and think that what is said in mainstream news is truthful? Or are they very selective about their beliefs as well? So all I'd say is just be very careful where you get your information from. You can always come to the source to ask me a question about anything, and I'll always give you my perception, and it's just my reality. But we need to think critically about everything. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to connect with you and your community. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And Lark, you have kept me in a very meditative state patting your cat. So thank you so much. And also Travis with the fire in the background. Well, I think it's a green screen or whatever it is in the background. But thank you to everybody, and thank you for your questions. And I'll get some recipes to you soon, Sean. And keep being you, Sean. I mean, you are, I always say, like, you think I'm controversial? Go have a look at Sean.
I don't have a choice. I'm stuck with who I am, so that's just the way it is. But and I'm too old to care at this point. So that's a nice thing. I can't wait till I'm 90 and senile, and you really don't give an F what you say. You can get away with it then. Anyway, thanks again, Pete. It's wonderful talking to you. Good luck. Stay safe. Keep doing what you're doing, and I honestly, hopefully, we get to hook up in person at some point down the road, and our journey, our paths will cross in real life. So. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
All right, guys. I'm gonna end the meeting. This will be up on YouTube in a few days or so. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.